1 April. One APIA Nevada is a grassroots nonprofit organization that advocates for policies empowering everyday Asian Pacific Islander Nevadans. Nevada is home to a growing APIA community, accounting for 1 in 10 voters. We are One APIA Nevada. Tonight's episode of Out in Front is brought to you by our season sponsors, Nevada State Education Association, 1 APIA Nevada, Silver State Voices, and Stefan and Marta Schmidt.
Hey everyone, thank you so much for joining. Welcome to Out in Front. My name is Amber Falgo. I'm currently the communications director with Battleborn Progress, and I am super excited for everyone to join us tonight. So we are going to be talking about something that has been a hot topic for a minute, obviously, because we are quickly approaching the 2024 election. I know most folks, or a lot of folks I've heard, are pretty tired of elections starting earlier and earlier. But what I will tell you is we have a lot of stuff that we can be preparing for now as we move into January. And we are also here in Nevada going to have one of our earliest election cycles to date. So I'm going to get started right away with one of my favorite folks, because I've worked with her for so very long on a ton of election protection stuff and a lot of nonpartisan voter education work. Emily Prasad Zamora is joining us. She's the executive director with Silver State Voices. Emily, thank you so much for joining us. I want to kick it to you first, and I want us to start off by having you explain the key aspects of voting rights that every citizen should be aware of as we approach this important election year, regardless of their political affiliation.
Thank you so much, Amber, and thank you for having me this evening. I hope you're doing well, and hello to all of your viewers. So as you said, I can't believe it, but the election cycle is right around the corner. And I think that there are a couple of things that are really important for your viewers to know. One is that we are actually going to be having 3 elections next year. So our first election will be what we refer to for short as the PPP. That's the presidential preference primary. And so what that means is that if you are registered to a political party that has 2 or more candidates that are running for president, there should be a presidential preference primary where the party gets to select who their nominee will be. And so the Democrats and the Republicans are both going to have a presidential preference primary that will be on February 6th. There is 1 week of early voting that I believe starts on January 27th and goes until February 2nd or 3rd. I believe it's the 2nd. And we'll make sure that information is correct in the chat for this event. But that's an important thing to know. You know, previously our state was just a caucus-based system, and you could only, for the most part, go caucus the day of, and we've changed things due to Assembly Bill 126 that was sponsored by Speaker Jason Frierson in the 21st legislative session. And so it's so much easier. The caucus is great for the politicos out there, but it's not the most accessible form of being able to cast your ballot. So that's something that I think is really important. There's also important, if you are a registered Republican, there's also might be a little bit of confusion out there for you, because the Republican Party here has decided that there's going to be a presidential preference primary, but there's also going to be a caucus. So I'm not here to go into all of the madness of that, because that could be many hour long conversation. However, if you are a registered Republican, I would make sure that you do your research and figure out which one you want to participate in. And technically, you can participate in both. We have the primary that's going to be in June, where we'll have a lot of folks who are, going to be running for office, certain county commissions, all of the assembly, state senate, all of those offices will be up for election. And then we have the general election that's on in early November. I think some important things that every citizen should know, if you are 18 years or older and a Nevada citizen, you've been a citizen for at least 30 days, then you do have the right to vote here in the state of Nevada. You do not have to show an ID unless you are a first-time voter. And I think something that's also important is that here in Nevada, we have a lot of different options in how you can cast your ballot. You can go early vote, you can vote in person on election day, and thanks to AB 321, you have the right to cast your ballot via a vote by mail ballot. You'll get that in the mail, and you can put it back in your mailbox, or you can go to a local drop box and turn in your ballot. I particularly love to do that. I sit down with my family, fill out my ballot, and turn it in at my closest drop box. And it makes, voting fun in a different way. So yeah, I think those are a couple of, we can go on and on about this topic, but I think those are some of the key things that voters should know in this critical election cycle.
Absolutely. And that's one of my favorite things about having you on is everything about voting. And so you can give that amazing overview of what everyone should know before they head to the polls and before they cast their ballot. It's fantastic. Emily, one more question for you, and then I'll move to some of our other guests. In the current political climate, there's a heightened focus on democracy and civic engagement. How can individuals contribute to the democratic process in a nonpartisan way and ensure their voices are heard in the upcoming election?
Well, I think that there are some of the ways that are very just, I think, more apparent is making sure that if you are eligible to vote, that you are registered to vote and that you have your information updated. The average move rate in the state of Nevada goes back and forth, but is usually somewhere around 21%. That means 1 in 5 people are moving every year. And a lot of times, making sure your voter registration is not updated. That's actually really important, because you want to make sure that you're voting for the people that represent you in your particular areas. A lot of times people just focus on the president. And yes, we have a presidential election coming up. It's super important, but there's a lot of stuff going on right now with the school board. You have an opinion about that? Some of those people will be up for election. So make sure you're registered so you can make your decision, your voice being heard in those particular things. I think beyond that, if you can, donate your time. We as Silver State Voices, we run the nonpartisan election protection program. And so we're always looking for volunteers. We have many of our partners that sit at our coalition that are running nonpartisan GOTV programs or even educational programs. And they're always looking for volunteers. And of course, sure, make sure that you, if you can, donate, right? I think that's something that's not talked about a lot. When we talk about the political campaigns and everything, it's always donating to candidates, and that's important. But a lot of the work that you see that's really impacting communities that are not usually at the forefront of democracy is really being conducted by nonprofits that have 501c3 status that are trusted messengers in their communities. And they in order for them to do the kick-ass work that they do on a day-to-day basis, they need to raise money. And it's hard, let me tell you, being an ET, being able to like raise money and also lead strategy and all the other things that we do, it's really hard. I'd say, what are some other things? Making sure, you all are a communications led organization. I think something that's really important is that in this election cycle, you're going to see a lot of things out there on the internet. Some things that are good and correct, and some things that are just like are flat out wrong, right? And so I think really being careful about what you're sharing, what you're reposting, retweet. It's always going to be Twitter to me, not X, but like retweeting or what have you, and flagging the fake news, the mis and disinformation as well.
It'll always be Twitter to me too. I'm still tweeting. I don't know what X is.
Yeah.
Oh, good. Thank you for saying all of that, especially the piece about election workers. There has been a lot of threats and attacks and just general hatred toward our election workers. And we have seen a lot of them, for valid reasons, pull out of wanting to do it and not be able to do it. So that is going to be a significant need. In addition to everything else that Emily said, that is a huge problem that we're seeing across the state and frankly across the country. So that is going to be a major thing as we move forward into next year. Okay, I want to head over to Carrie, who is the Nevada State Director with All Voting is Local. Carrie, your organization, All Voting is Local, has been particularly instrumental in expanding voting access across Nevada. Could you share some of the key initiatives and successes that have made a difference, particularly in ensuring language justice and something that's particularly important to me, polling places on tribal lands?
Yeah, definitely. Just want to say hi, Amber, and thanks so much for having me, and hi to all the viewers out there. So during legislative session, All Voting worked with several key partners, including Emily with Silver State Voices and ACDC and our coalition, to pass AB 246 through the Nevada Assembly and House. So this legislation would have expanded statewide Spanish voting access, and it would have expanded Chinese Mandarin in the 2024 election in Clark County. Unfortunately, Governor Lombardo, he vetoed that bill. But the good news is that Clark County agreed, because of this legislation, they agreed to work with our partner, ACDC, to translate voting materials and a sample ballot into Chinese Mandarin for all three elections in 2024. So while we did not get the main goal, I think we got a very, very significant win. This is, for me, this is a massive win because of the work of ACDC and All Voting in our coalition. I really don't think we would have gotten this without putting a little bit of pressure on Clark County with this legislation. And we're definitely not done yet. We're definitely going to come back in 2025. So we'll talk about that down the road. And then as far as our tribal nations, so during legislative session, we actually had two voting access laws that affect our Nevada's tribal nations actually be signed by Governor Lombardo, which was extremely exciting. So those bills were SB 216 and SB 327. So what SB 216 is going to do is it's going to mandate better communication between Nevada's tribal nations and our election officials, just to make sure that the nations receive equal access to polling places and voting. Because some of the things that my team and we had seen in the past is just not the best communication. And so how did we fix that? And we fixed that with this bill. So that's super exciting. And then SB 327 is what it's going to do is it's not going to require any Nevada tribe to request a polling place through a paper request, but instead requires communication between the tribal nation and the county clerk 3 months before each election in 2024 about setting up a polling place or a drop-off box. And then every tribal nation is going to be guaranteed a polling place unless they opt out. So that bill is extremely exciting because it really puts the access back to tribal nations and really puts pressure on the county clerks to do the right thing and provide those reservation-based polling places. So again, a huge win, really exciting. And then, lastly, I just want to say, like, our work with the tribal nations and organizations like NVAN and tribal leaders and activists, we really grew reservation-based polling places from 2 polling places in 2019 to 17 in 2022. And hopefully in 2024, we'll see even more because of some of these bills that were signed into law in the 2023 legislative session. Yeah.
That is huge. That going from 2 to that many is huge for tribal nations. I've had many conversations with my husband about how access to voting, he's not from the tribes here, he's from the Hopland Band up in Northern California, but like there's like an hour away from actual like cities that have a ton of polling places. So it's really a struggle when you're dealing with a lack of access to transportation, a lack of access to valuable resources, and then also you need to cast a ballot and the nearest polling place is an hour away. That's
for sure. Yeah. And you also want to vote in your own community. And I think that that's 100% fair that we have these reservation-based polling places. And so I think what all the groups that have been working on this have been able to accomplish is just so incredible for where we started in 2019 to where we are now. It's like really amazing. It's only to get better. So that's the good news. Yeah.
I love that. That's amazing. Thank you so much for the work that you do. And then also for working with organizations who are entrenched in Native issues and advocating for their own people. I think that's fantastic. All right, Carrie, I know we touched on it a little bit with Emily, but as we approach this coming election, could you explain basically the fundamental differences between a primary and a caucus and how those differences may impact the electoral process and voter participation?
Yeah. So a primary, and in particular the presidential preference primary and the PPP, it's going to be a state-run election. So in a state-run election, what that means is you can vote by mail or vote in person during early voting or on election day. And then just like Emily had talked a lot about it before, and the only thing I want to add is just if you do want to participate in that, you do have to be registered as a Democrat or Republican because our country considers those the major political parties. Luckily, Nevada has same-day registration, thanks partly to Emily. So like very exciting that you can, even if you forget to update it or you're not registered, you can go during early voting or on election day and register that day. And you can register or update it at your political party that day. So if you forget, don't worry, but try not to because it's much better to deal with it now than on that day, but it's totally okay if you do forget. And then what a caucus is it's an election held by a political party, and it really is considered like a neighborhood gathering to discuss the party's nomination for president, but you're still able to like vote for your candidate of choice. But there's usually like a lot more discussion around that process. But I think what the key differences of here is the caucus that I think we're going to see this year, it's only going to be one day. You have to show voter ID. There'll be like limited polling places, like things like that. And then the PPP is going to be much, much more accessible with 7 days of early voting and vote by mail and same day voter registration. So I do think there will be key differences, like depending on which ones you decided to choose and if you're a registered Republican voter. And I do want to say, if you do want to vote in the caucus, I would highly advise you to call the Nevada GOP offices to get the information because the state is not running that election. And so it's going to have very limited information about that. But, it's your right as a voter to participate how you want to. So if you do want to participate, that's totally fine. But just call your local GOP headquarters office.
Absolutely. I was going to say something similar because I pulled up the SOS website. There's nothing really about on there. So if you are a registered Republican and you want to do the caucus, you really need to reach out to the party to get all of the details. That way you're able to participate because that's going to be crucial here in a few months. And there will be for the presidential preference primary, we did drop the SOS website into the chat, and early voting for that will begin Saturday, January 27th and run through February 2nd. So Emily was, of course, right. And then the actual election will be held on February 6th. So there will be an early voting period, which is fantastic because I know that can increase substantially how many people are able to get out to the polls and participate. So that's wonderful. Okay, so now let's go to our very favorite attorney, Bradley Schrager, whom we absolutely love.
Hi, Amber.
Bradley, in the context of Nevada elections, could you shed light on the legal aspects and rights that voters should be aware of to ensure their participation is protected and also effective?
Sure. Yeah, no, that's a question I get a lot, and it's a really good one. I also want to say hello to everyone and also say how proud I am to be here with these other guests who have worked so hard for so long to expand voting access. And before I answer that question, I want to underscore something Carrie talked about with the tribal voting, because I don't know whether people understand the length of the struggle and the difficulty that's been, and the litigation and the biannual slog that it's been just to get basic suffrage to folks out on reservations. And I think that one of the great parts of the law now is that clerks can't backtrack now. There was always a sort of a shell game with tribes that they would go through the process, and then the next time they'd have to start over, and that there'd be turnover. Now it's still not perfect, but it's so much better, and it's thanks to the hard work of people like Carrie and her and the organization. So I'm really want to underscore that. You know, when you talk about voting in Nevada, there's an interaction between the law and your own sort of activity, right? Because the first defense, the first responder to your suffrage situation is you. So you need to be proactive. The laws are there now. We've had such a great expansion over the last few sessions, not the last one, but the two before that, expansion of voting opportunities. And it's become much easier. But that doesn't mean that it's always easier for, especially, for example, new people. So not only update your own info so that you know that your clerk is sending your ballot to the right place and you're going to get it. Call if you don't get it, and all those things. Reach out to your loved ones, especially older folks or students or new residents who may not be accustomed to our system. Make it part of your thing to reach out to them and ensure that they also have access, and that they're confident that they have that access. You know, we all get texts and calls from whether it's parties or PACs or organizations saying, "What's your plan to go vote?" And we hear that so often that it becomes sort of a cliche. It's actually a really good plan to have a plan to vote. And so not only have a plan for you, but have a plan for your family. Make it a day. Now you can vote anywhere in your county. There are so many opportunities and so many hours for you to go and vote. But take away the confusion or the late rush or the possibility that yes, we have same day reservation registration, and that's great, but it can be flustering, especially for older folks or folks new to the process, to not get their ballot and then not know whether they're registered and have to deal with officialdom when they get there. And there's a line of folks, and there's a certain amount of some people don't want to deal with that. So take that away, make it easy. But the sort of structural legal things that we've put in place over the last few years, automatic voter registration when you have dealings with the DMV. If you have to have dealings with the DMV, at least come away with your registration squared away. Same day registration, which is an incredible boon. Those people that have followed elections in Nevada for a long time remember the horror of massive provisional voting. You'd be at the wrong polling place or the wrong CD, or somebody couldn't find your papers, and we'd wind up with between 15 and 30,000 provisional ballots that would never get counted. Now we have almost none because you can fix it there. Try to fix it before that time, but you can fix it there. That alone has been a tremendous boon. But beyond that, you have the right to an assistant to help you vote. You have a right to language access. You have the right to either collect for people or give your ballot to a collector who will take it to the drop box. There are so many ways for you now to vote, so take advantage of all of them, and don't let your family or your friends or your new residents or students be confused or deterred. It is easy. It's just not routine yet because these are all new systems. So work towards that. And one step beyond that, we talked a little bit about election workers, who are the backbone of this entire process. If you have an opportunity, go do that. It's incredibly rewarding, and right now it's actually an act of tremendous civil service because of the pressures upon those folks. So many people don't want to go back because of what they fear they may have to go through. But trust me, it's worth it. It is a day in the trenches of democracy that you will be very proud that you went through. So all of those things, the sort of legal structure is there for you now, but it sort of comes down to you to be proactive to put those things into motion, because democracy in the end is participatory. And so this is the sort of finest example of that.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Bradley, for all of that. And actually, you touched on something that leads into another question we have for you. Given your expertise, could you explain the role of election observers and the legal framework surrounding their involvement in ensuring fair and transparent elections here in Nevada?
Yeah, this is a sort of double-edged question, right? Because there are the election observers who are there to observe and to report back to, whether it's a party or it's an organization, about things are going smoothly. Here are the problems. They're running out of ballots. There's an issue with this many machines at a particular polling site. That can be really useful, right? And it sort of keeps the confidence of the community up when there are their friends and neighbors and people they trust who are on site helping to make sure things run smoothly. But election observers have to do so within certain boundaries, right? There's certain places they can stand. There's certain things they can do. They can't interfere. In fact, it's a felony to interfere. And in fact, we raise the penalties for interfering on site by observers or harassing election workers. The flip side of the coin is that there are folks who take election observation to a bit of a paranoid, obsessive level, in which it can be unnerving to election workers to have people who want to look over their shoulders and want to essentially run the election as sort of proxies for the people there to do those things. That can be disruptive of the process, and election observers have to identify themselves. They have to be calm. They have to be quiet. They need to step outside if they need to make calls dealing with, the sort of state of the ballots, or we're running out of paper, any of those things. But we cannot have and cannot permit interference with the process by people calling themselves observers, who are really there to essentially overturn the apple cart. So, I would like to be able to say that my experience is that election observers always obey those rules and everything's always calm. That's not always true. And so we need to be vigilant to say, yes, we want people to observe. It's absolutely crucial for people to have confidence in the system by being there and seeing and reporting what they see. But we cannot go beyond that without some sort of repercussions for folks who are there to disrupt the process.
Absolutely. Thank you for making that distinction and for talking about both sides of it, because I think we've seen an influx in recent years of some of the more obsessive aspects to observation that aren't necessarily as productive for our democracy or for voter participation. So thank you for talking about both. That's really important.
You just put that more nicely than I could have. So good for you.
That's my whole job.
Yeah.
That is my whole job. Emily, let's talk about what Silver State Voices has done to promote voter engagement and protect voting rights here in Nevada. And can you share some of the success stories or challenges that you've encountered in that fight?
Oh my God. What haven't we done? I think one of my favorite things to really talk about is our work around rights restoration. So in 2019, we passed Assembly Bill 431 that was sponsored by Assemblyman Speaker Frierson, Jason Frierson. And pretty much what that bill did is it returned the right back to vote to anybody who's been incarcerated with a felony conviction. And even once you've been released, even if you're on parole and probation, you are eligible to register to vote. And that work has really been a journey. I feel like when once it passed, one of the biggest things when it comes to policy making, we often really think about passing the policy, and we don't think enough about what the actual implementation of it is, and making sure that the public is aware of things being actual law, right? And so what we saw once the bill was passed is we saw that there was really a huge disconnect within the community, right? He has been on here before, but our rights restoration coordinator, Jagita Chambers, he's formally impacted himself, and we brought him on to really lead this work. And there's been a lot of events that he's done, and what was really clear to us from the beginning is that there's a lack of trust within the system, right? Because we're asking folks who were put behind bars by the system itself to have trust in a system all over again, right? And like, I don't know about you, but I don't know if I would if I was in that situation, I don't know that I would really trust government in itself, right? But the reality is that there's a lot of work that needs to happen. And so through our rights restoration work, for example, we're outside of parole and probation at least 3 times a week. Chicken is out there and building conversation with folks that are just being released from prison. And sometimes I think we think about the bottom line of like, we need to get folks registered or they have the right back, but we've learned that we have to like take a step back because we need to be able to just listen and hear what their concerns are, and put that organizer hat back on, right? And we give folks sometimes just like information to resources, or it's just a bottle of water and pizza. And we've had situations before where folks come up to us and say, this is like my first meal after being released, right? And like that just definitely for me hits in a different way. It's not just about getting them registered to vote, but being able to hear what are they worried about now that they've been released. So I think that's been a really amazing opportunity, and has really taught us a lot more about what needs to happen within this particular space. I think, some of the things that I will say that are the most recent, we worked really hard with the Secretary of State's office and a lot of our coalition partners around the law that Bradley was alluding to a little bit around protecting election workers. And that was SB 406. And yes, it does make it, a felony to harass election workers, but I've been in this world for quite some time, and I've really seen it firsthand since 2020. There has been so much harassment that has happened for election workers. And, these are people that we really need to be able to fill into these roles, right? And not only do we need election workers, but we need a pool of election workers that come from many of the communities that don't have the highest voter turnout rates, so that when they are going to turn out to vote, they feel more comfortable being able to go to a polling location and see that the workers look just like them, or that they speak the language that they speak and feel more comfortable, right? And I'm really excited that SB 406 passed. We've seen so much already in the news. Just today, The Secretary of State's office released a statement about some harassment that has happened in a couple of other states and potentially targeting Nevada. And so, I'm really excited to make sure that through our election protection program that we're doing the best that we can to be those allies to these election workers, because there is no election happening ever without our unsung heroes. Beyond that, I would just say that there's a lot that we're doing around voter education. One of the biggest things I kind of said a little bit earlier is that with the presidential election, folks usually just try to focus on the top of the ticket, the sexy thing, the president, right? But there are so many other types of office. For some folks, depending where you live in Las Vegas, your city council person, like I live in Ward 3. This is the first time since the passage of AB 50 that we'll have Ward 3 on an even year election cycle, right? And so making sure that folks really understand that these things are on the ballot and what the impact of these positions are super important as well.
Thank you so much, Emily. That is all crucial. And I appreciate all the work y'all have done on rights restoration, on election protection. Specifically, the election protection piece, I think, is going to be incredibly important next year, as it was in 22 and 2020 and years before. But I know with the presidential race shaping up the way it is, we are likely to see a lot of obstruction and problems, and it is going to be crucial for folks to volunteer and help support our organization and also Silver State Voices, All Voting is Local, and everyone as we do that election observation and protection work. Next, I just want to take a brief second to plug, we are going to do a presidential preference primary, a PPP. That's like the weirdest. It reminds me of COVID. We're going to do an out in front on that here at the end of the month. So those details will be put into the chat too. I just wanted to kind of plug that because it's on topic sort of for what we are discussing tonight. So please stay tuned for the details on that. It's going to be the end of this month. And it should be sure to have a lot of wonderful information about how folks go about participating in the presidential preference primary and all the details surrounding it. Okay, so Carrie, in your experience, what are some of the unique challenges and opportunities that Nevada faces in expanding voter access and promoting a more inclusive democracy? And how can individuals support organizations like yours or others in those efforts?
Yeah, so I think the first challenge we're going to see in this year is the misinformation and disinformation. So I really encourage everybody to make sure they're working with organizations that they trust and like working with news outlets that they trust, because I mean, even as we approach this PPP, voters are very, very confused. And so make sure you're going to websites like the Secretary of State's office and your local election offices and not reposting or resharing anything you're not sure of. So I do think that's going to be a big challenge, and definitely going to websites like my website, like allvotingslocal.org. Like we're going to put up a PPP landing page so that there's more information out there, because it is something that we are concerned about it's a new election. And so we want to make sure that voters are empowered with the information that they need to go into that election with everything they need to vote. And then another key issue that we're going to be working on in 2024 and 25 is really working to see how we can expand Spanish language into the rural counties. This has been something that we've been working on since 2021, I think. Yeah. And so that's something we're really going to be working on. And so if there is interest out there, if you want to get more involved in our efforts, you can go to allvotingslocal.org and sign up for our Nevada email list, and we can let you know more about how to get involved. And then lastly, I would really encourage every Nevadan to meet with the election officials in your county and really tell them what you care about. Because I think one of my favorite things about living in this state is how accessible our elected officials are and even appointed officials. So I really think that's just so important to let them know what you want to see your county to make it more inclusive. And that's it.
That's perfect. Thank you so much. And you kind of touched on it. We had another question that spoke to Nevada's diverse population, right?
Mhm.
And so how do you all, and you kind of covered this, but if you want to expand on
Yeah.
how you work to ensure every community, including tribal nations, are empowered and have equal access to the voting process, because that's huge, right?
Yeah, so I mean, I think a lot of the stuff I talked about before, but also I really think like the most important thing that I've learned while doing this work is like meeting the community where they are. So I think some of the things that we've been doing over the past couple of months after legislative session is, so we just did a reservation tour with 6 northeastern Nevada tribes. And so those are the most remote tribes in our state. And so these are tribes where what Bradley was talking about before, where in the past they would have to drive 3 hours one way in order to go vote. And so we're making sure that even though we did pass this really amazing law that's going to help out with their access, to make sure that it's actually being implemented in the right way, and having those conversations with the community and the tribal councils and the leaders that actually live in the community and are on the reservations. So I think that's one way we're really making sure that the access is there with the implementation of SB 327. And then I think another way is my staffer, Jennifer Willett, and we just did a rural tour in August, and we met with 6 rural county clerks. And I think that this was very interesting because I do think like the rural clerks are facing a different challenge sometimes than Washoe and Clark. And we were meeting with really what I see as the public servants of rural Nevada, and like the ones that are really out there to protect voters and want to do right by voters. And I think the most exciting thing that I saw is, because of our language access work that we've been doing, the rural counties are starting to take notice. And so we had conversations in Humboldt County where they said they're going to set up a Spanish language hotline in 2024. That is absolutely insane. And so we'll see if it actually happens, but for right now, that's their commitment. And so that's amazing. And then other counties like Douglas said that they're going to expand Spanish language voting in 2026. So we are getting a lot closer to this expansion of language access across the state. So it's just absolutely amazing. And so those are ways that we are, making sure we're holding our county clerks accountable, but also working with them hand in hand to expand language access.
That's amazing. Like,
Thanks.
yes,
Yeah.
fantastic. I am actually, side note, doing my master's, and I'm interning with another organization, and one of the things we've worked on is foster care, specifically in the rural areas. It's a very different setup than Washoe and Clark, unsurprisingly. And so we've been working on that, and it's been very interesting to gain insight into how the rural county, the differences and also some of the similarities within the rural counties compared to like Clark and Washoe. So I love seeing the expand access for language and all of those things, because it's so crucial. Because as Reno and Vegas become more and more expensive, more and more people are having to live further and further out and travel into those places to work. So there's a lot of diversity that is cropping up in those areas now. And I think it's great that we're supporting that, and also trying to focus on making changes that impact individuals within their communities. That's amazing.
Yeah, thanks. And Humboldt County actually said that. They said they're doing this because they're seeing how fast demographics are changing within their county. So like, it is really exciting to see them take the initiative and do the right thing for voters in their county. Yeah.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. And that's 100% true, that the demographics are shifting quickly. So that's really good to see. Thank you so much, Carrie. Emily, so let's talk about why are elections so important? Like the core of it. I think we get caught up in, I know that seems like a silly question to all of us on this program right now, but I think we get caught up in like all of the access, all of which is super, super important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not discounting any of that. But at the core of our democracy and our country is elections, right? So can you speak to how important elections are and how important it is to make sure that we educate people on that?
Yeah, of course. I don't know. I'm sorry. I'm still a little shook on this, like Humboldt County making promises. Not them, but it was not that long ago where I remember having conversations in other rural counties about trying to expand just to have Spanish and being told that this is America and everybody should learn how to speak English. And so it's very exciting. I'm a little like flabbergasted, but it's just like in a good way that like it's very great to see this potential progress happening. So fingers crossed. And I think that's a testament to the work that All Voting is Local is doing, in coalition with others as well. But I think that when I think about voting and the premise of voting and why it's so important, for me, I really feel like it's plain and simple. Everybody has something that they care about, right? Maybe what's important to me is different than what's important to you, but we all have an opinion in some shape or form. I started out my political career doing voter registration, and I would do a lot of on-campus voter registration and would have, folks go up to folks and be like, are you registered to vote at your current address? And, people would be like, I'm not interested. I don't really care. Well, you're not interested. Well, you're a student here on this campus. You're like, do you care about the price of your tuition? Do you care about what you're learning in your classroom, what you have access to, what the job market is going to be like when you graduate or what have you, right? And sometimes like I get folks like stop and really wonder like, actually, yeah, I do. I'm really pissed that my tuition went up this year or what have you, right? And I think a lot of the times we have to stop and think about those things that are affecting our day-to-day life, because whether we like it or not, politics affects every aspect of life. And if you have a problem with something that's happening in your community, whether it's within your city or within your state or within your school board or higher education or within the legal system within your state or what have you, most likely it is being impacted by some type of policy, and somebody out there has the ability to change that or make an impact or what have you. And so when I think about why it's important to vote, it's because if you want to see some type of change happening in any type of issue, you have to be able to cast your ballot. I can't tell you how many times I've come across people that have an opinion, those people on Facebook or whatever, that annoying family member or friend that has an opinion or what have you. And then you ask them, well, when was the last time you voted? Like, oh, 10 years ago, or I haven't voted ever. Well, like, come on. And I think the other aspect of it is that there are so many people here in this country who would love to have the ability to vote, right? How many of our folks that we work with, our community members, I live in a mixed status family home, right? That wish as much as they possibly could that they would have the right to vote. Like, I see it my responsibility to not only cast my ballot, but to do this work, to be able to speak up for those who don't have that particular right to vote. So I think those are a couple of the things that I think about, at least when I think of why voting is so important. And, the other thing is that if you don't speak up for yourself or your opinions or what have you, then other people are going to. When our work that we do at Silver State Voices is really key to our mission to ensure that underrepresented communities are at the forefront of democracy. Less than, a little bit over 100 years ago, people that I'm a women didn't have the right to vote, right? And even less than 100 years ago, people that are of my background, right? I identify as both Asian and Latina. we didn't have the right to be able to vote. And even till this day, in a lots of parts of the country, people like me are discriminated against when it comes to being able to cast their ballot. And so I think we have to keep all of those things in consideration and speak up.
Absolutely. And thank you for speaking to that piece, because I think a lot of times many of us, probably myself included, quite frankly, take voting for granted as just a thing that we can do that, it's not really ever been a huge problem for me to vote. It's not really ever been a huge inconvenience for me to vote. That is not true for tribal nations. That is not true for Latinos. That is not true for a number of other people in this country. And so I think you speak to that so beautifully. And I can't thank you enough for that, because I really do think we don't pay a lot of attention to how some of us have it very easy when it comes to voting, and just are like, yeah, no, I voted. That's the thing that I did. But that's not the same for everyone, despite all of the work that a lot of us have done on this call to increase access and increase the ease with which folks can vote. So thank you for that. Bradley, let's talk about some legal stuff. With concerns about voter suppression and disenfranchisement, which is significant, what legal measures or safeguards are in place right now to guarantee fair access to voting for all eligible folks in Nevada?
Yeah. Well, there are organizations that are working every single day to clear away the obstacles that still remain. We've done a lot of work here in Nevada over the last few cycles, as we talked about, to clear those obstacles. But there's still people that are going to continue to throw themselves in front of progress. So sort of doing legislative and political battle with those folks is an important thing to sort of undertake. It's always going to be a struggle, but the legal safeguards are there now. We have, we've always had the cooperation of secretaries of state, whether they're Democrat or Republican. We've always had cooperation of law enforcement, who, in my experience, if there's an issue at the polls, has been quick to resolve it, whether it's harassment. Going back to, I remember back in 2008 when the first African American president was about to be elected, we were all apprehensive, and there were issues at the polls, and even back then, they were taken care of promptly and respectfully. So the sort of structure's there now. One of the issues I'd like to see here in Nevada, and I think that following off of something Emily said, which is about the importance of elections, which is how we talk about elections and how we conduct elections and how we react to elections, says a lot to help us diagnose our collective social health, right? And right now, it doesn't feel like we are tremendously collectively socially healthy given the state of our elections. Some of that has to do with this notion of election integrity, which people have turned into almost a slur upon the health of our election system. And I want to say that we need to establish routines and patterns that people are comfortable with in this period of change, that are reflected in our elections. We've undergone a lot of alterations in how we vote here in Nevada and elsewhere. And my parents, my grandparents, every 2 years, every 4 years, would get up and get their voter card and go to the same firehouse or the same elementary school and pull the levers. And there was a routine to it, and the results were taken as well. Maybe my candidates won, maybe they didn't, but I went. I sort of lived with it. It was part of civic life that was not particularly controversial itself. That's all changed. But I think that if we have several cycles in which people are now used to how we vote now and where they vote, and can see in the results trustworthy outcomes, whether they like them or not. One thing that happened last year, whether you're a fan of our current governor, Joe Lombardo, or not, his election in the midst of what was an essentially Democratic year otherwise, I think did some of the work of sort of pulling people back toward understanding the basic fairness and propriety of our election process. And if you remember, then Sheriff Lombardo had to fight a primary battle, which was contested by his opponent, who was making wild accusations regarding voter fraud. So the governor Lombardo, then Sheriff Lombardo, had to go into court and argue that it was absolutely insane that anybody was flipping votes, or that some algorithm was living inside the machines. He had to go and argue that the results were fair. So in some ways, over the next, if we can keep the republic, as Benjamin Franklin said, over the next 3, 4, 5 cycles, and you see results that are varied, right? That sometimes Republicans have an advantage, sometimes Democrats have an advantage. That's the sort of way of the world, right? That itself is going to lend, I think, some more confidence to the public regarding process. And so, you asked me more specifically about the legal safeguards. Those are all there now. I mean, unless someone's going to attack the elections physically or in some other way, the safeguards are there. It's about sort of coming to a place collectively where elections are once again, okay, they can be controversial. They can be even sort of high temperature zones, right, where people get really worked up. But they are still the ways in which we make collective decisions about leadership. And reinstilling confidence in that will help sort of take down the pressure cooker of our society in a very important way. So I look forward to that, hopefully.
That's more hopeful than I know you as.
Yeah, I'm trying.
It's good to hear. No, and I think there is definitely some validity to that the longer there's a pattern in practice of how we vote that is consistent, that will increase confidence overall. I tend to agree with you there. And I know we are coming up on time. I will take one more plug just to say that we are going to be doing this again at the end of the month, and we're going to be specifically focusing on the presidential preference primary. So that will be a not want to miss it episode. I'm sure it'll be full of a lot of wonderful information. So now I just want to go around to everybody with final thoughts, and I don't know, what are you most looking forward to in 2024? Whoever wants to start. Emily, let's start with you.
I'm looking forward to hopefully not losing my sanity in 2024. No, I think all jokes aside, I think what I'm really looking forward is seeing a lot of first-time voters come out. Some of the work that we do is, working with our partners and registering a lot of first-time voters, whether they're high school students or new U.S. citizens. And I think for me, I think that type of work, and also registering folks who are coming out of prison and may have never had the ability to cast a ballot. I think for me, I like to remind myself of that level of excitement and why we do this particular work, and just the stories that we hear out on the field, and hoping that these folks, are excited to participate in our democratic system and be civically engaged. So I think that is what I'm excited, and I'm hoping to also see, Nevada perform well. I think that there's a lot of, I think, national naysayers that are just like, oh, well, Nevada, they always perform this certain way, right? But the reality is that we live in this really purple state. And we've been able to have a lot of the progressive wins that we have because people on the ground do so much hard work to ensure that progressive champions are elected. And so I'm really looking forward to seeing all of that work continue on this cycle.
Thank you. That's amazing. Carrie, what are you looking forward to?
Yeah, I think I'm looking forward to I think all three of us have been in this work for a long time, right? And so I think really what Bradley was saying, all of the work and the safeguards that we've put into place, that makes me really hopeful and really excited to make sure that we're protecting voters. So I'm really excited for that. And then really like one of my favorite things is doing that first shift of election protection on an early vote day and getting to talk to a voter. Because it's just honestly to me, like I'm such an organizer at heart. It is honestly the best experience. And like getting to like inform them and really tell them any information that they need and to see them go vote because like you spoke to them is really exciting. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And I really like this new positive, hopeful 2024 spin. So I'm really going to take that away from this call today. Yeah.
All right, because I'm gonna revert to type for a second and say that the sort of hope I had for the arc of improvement is long term. I think I tell my daughter, sweetheart, it's going to get worse before it gets better. It's going to get better, but it's going to get worse before then. I'm incredibly apprehensive about 2024. I think that the ingredients of our politics right now are incredibly combustible. And as we saw, Emily mentioned it, there are some terrible things happening out there today. The incidents we're hearing about it, if those are harbingers of the prospect of political violence in this country, 2024 is going to be a really difficult time. And look, let's not. Obviously, we're not sugarcoating the fact that there's the possibility of criminal proceedings coming to a fruition regarding the leading candidate of a major national party, unprecedented. I have no idea how that's going to play out, or what that's going to mean to our national discourse and our ability to conduct elections. We're going to find out though, and like Carrie said, you got to get up and do the work. It doesn't really matter what you want to happen. It doesn't matter what sort of outcome you want to have. You got to go and make it happen. It's not going to happen for you. So that's a little bit of cold water on the hope for the future in the near term.
You had to do it. You just had to. No, I agree with you. And I agree with everything that folks have said as far as that goes. We're going to have to be very vigilant and tempered next year. And as we move into next year, I would encourage folks to keep those things in mind: vigilance and being measured and like breathing, because it's likely to be a pretty difficult year overall. But the good thing is we do have a lot of amazing people on the ground working every single day on voter access, voter engagement, on making sure our elections are safe, making sure that they're secure, and making sure that people are able to cast their ballots. So that is one thing that gives me hope, is that there is a lot of folks on the ground who are doing this type of work every day. And I want to thank all of them, because it is not easy work. It's really not. Okay, that is our show for tonight. I want to thank all of our guests and tell them that they have been wonderful and that we appreciate them coming on and talking about elections and what we are doing to make them safe, what we are doing to increase turnout, and all of those things as we head into 2024, which is sure to be an interesting year. So we will be back with you all at the end of November to talk about the presidential preference primary, which is happening early next year. So please join us then. And that is all I've got for y'all. Have a wonderful night. Thanks to all our viewers.